Hello everyone, and I'm Saurabh Tiwari. I'm based in Bhopal, and I'm going to share what I've been doing in my PhD work at IIT Kanpur. And design history is not just a kind of interest, but a kind of has developed as a passion now. So when I started this work, I realized that that there are a lot of things which are being said from the West, but we don't have things, especially in the postmodern history. So I mean, like if you see India's political context, people who are not from India, I mean, they often see India as a developing nation. And but few years back, or let's say a few decades back, it was not the same. We were very new, and then there has been several shift, like a certain shift, which is like visible in terms of our alignment, whether it's BRICS or G20, G15. So one wonders, like as a designer, that how what is the role of design in this, or is there a role of design in this? And when you look at design history in India or the history of design in India, there are several milestones which we talk about around design, not necessarily from design, which are which are being talked about. And then within India also, within especially within Indian academics, there have been a lot of discussion that what exactly is design. So one can see that uh, the definition or the understanding of design in India, especially shift from several definitions like problem solving or design for the masses or design as an economy booster or design as a policy or design for nation planning. So I'm going to my larger works looks into various positions of design in visions, in pedagogy and projects. And when I talk about visions, so I mean that what design is considered or projected in events, charters, several documents, or several proposals or working papers, and the time frame that I've been talking about is the post-colonial time frame, beyond, because there has been a lot of work which has been done in the colonial time, especially by American scholars and the British scholars, and so there's a huge gap which needs to be which needs to be forwarded. And so I'm in my work, I'm actually looking at the conception level only. And when I talk about conception level, design schools or the design academia has a major role there. So if you look, so I'm calling this design schools as cradles of design. And if you look at larger time frames, pre-independence was more about Shantiniketan, and post-independence we know that the two design schools, NID in Ahmedabad and IDC in Mumbai, they are like too popular. But when we talk about the recent times, especially the last 2 decades, we have seen several new schools coming up. So for me, there were four layers of data which I thought that I'll share. That one is the design itself, like if something is designed, that design is available for certain survey or certain analysis, and then documents about design, meaning the first-hand document like a dissertation or a kind of project report, or and then certain literature about that particular design or the larger discourse, and then the people who are associated with design. So I have actually found five paradigms in my study, and I I'm going to explain them one by one. So the first paradigm is the foundational paradigm, and it has certain backdrop uh, in several philosophies. So whenever we talk about design in India, so craft and art, I mean, is like one of the they are associated domains which we cannot miss. And so it was Tagore who rejected European techniques and called for several identities which were pan-Asian and also universal. So Shantiniketan, as one of the first art and design schools in the 20th century, called for harmonious universality. And then there were designers which were not so designers, like one of the political activists or great freedom fighter Mahatma Gandhi. Uh, his ideas on design are also reflected through his living. Several people have elaborated on that, so I'll just say that that Gandhi's ideas are kind of transmitted or can be seen in the practices of Khadi and Swadeshi. And then we had several other several which which looks into the form as a particular, one of the fundamental feature of explaining what is Indianism, and that was in architecture of many nationalist architects during 1930s and 40s. So these are two examples: Birla Temple in Delhi and then Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi. Post-independence, things changed with the PM Nehru coming in and looking for a very modern and international, a very outward-looking output. So all the things which were looking within, they were kind of they took a backseat, and then this aggressive modernism came emerged. I mean, this is quite a popular case study in Chandigarh by Lee Kapoor's here. So now when we talk about what has been the visions for the several design schools in India, India report, like I said, that's one of the milestones. And then so after visiting whole country resource center bureaucrats and so many other people, Charles and Ray Eames, they came up with one suggestion, formal suggestion known as the India Report in 1958. 1961, and they also recognized that in order to even approach the quality and values of a traditional society, a conscious effort must be made to relate every factor that might possibly have an effect. It means like you need to see India in its totality. They one of the ideas of Nehru was also that when Charles and Ray Eames are going to suggest us that what we have to do, it will be very modern looking. But actually, if you look at their own or the India report, it's very fundamental, and it talks about a lot of commonsensical things and a lot of foundational things. Uh, they refer Lota as one of the finest examples of Indian design, which has seasoned through decades and centuries and millenniums, and then how how this particular form has emerged. And this form, I think, is present across the countries, across the continents. In fact, in all the Eastern cultures. So the report recommended a problem-solving design consciousness that linked learning with actual experience and suggested that a designer could be a bridge between tradition and modernity. And hence, an idea came up in Ahmedabad in 1961. There was another center of design which emerged in 1969, which was which borrowed its root from HFG Ul, and since many of its first generation faculty, they studied at Royal College of Art in London, so it borrowed the ideology of RCA also. So if you look at the pedagogy uh, in this particular paradigm, it is more of functionalist and have a lot of progressive intent. So you'll see that design is considered as a solving activity, very much like engineering. And then if you look at the framework that how design is taught, so it's a kind of external imports, how not necessarily looking within, but bringing things from outside, be it a model from Basel School or Royal College or the school in Denmark. First generation projects, they were more like making working for public agencies. So many architecture projects and many mass manufacturing projects were taken at NID to because the idea was also to earn money. And so if you try to understand that what has been the foundational paradigm of design, it is revolutionary, it is functionalist, it borrows the ideas of design, and then it has to struggle for identity also, because it has to establish a space with among all the other disciplines which were popular then, like anthropology or or science or technology, which has a long academic history. And at the same time it was progressive because still it was adding up to more and more definitions. Now we come to the second paradigm, that is developmental paradigm. And this brings me to a very fundamental question, that design brings development or development brings design, but there's certain dialectics between design and development. So, and there have been several kind of debates in design history, especially by Papanek or G. Bonzepi. And at the same time, it was also design was also or design and technology was also seen as a medium of development, especially in a developed economy like India. So V. N. Adarkar, one of the most one of the first generation design thinkers, he proposed, he represented India in many of the ICSID conferences or now the WDO, he put forward the ideas of Indian design to the world, and then he identified that there are several promise, potential, and problems with done Indian scenario, and design can perhaps uh, bring in certain change or development. One of the most famous the landmark events around within this paradigm was the ICSID UNIDO Congress in 1979, which is popularly known as Ahmedabad Declaration. So this was a conference which happened at IDC, IIT Bombay, and NID Ahmedabad. Its sole objective was the promotion of industrial design in developing countries, and India was considered as one of the launch pads. So Clark, like she said, that it was kind of golden moment for the not just India but overall developing world. And one of the reasons I see is that now a lot of problems, especially the functional problems, were solved through design in the developed economies. And now the developed economies were looking for several of the markets also. So this idea of design and development was projected and through the central agency, ICSID. If you look at the pedagogy, so it was now, I mean, not just Western influence, but also local negotiation, which came in. So the Bahas and Ul influence, I mean, they continued, and the and the first generation teachers who studied at different European schools, it also continued. But now with this kind of new factor that was designed for development or designed for people, this new kind of pedagogical discourse emerged. So, and then when we look into the project, I mean, you find that there are people who are working for social design and the design for people, and also design for nation. That how do you represent nation? One of the most famous projects on social design was NID's collaboration with IIM Ahmedabad through IIM's director Ravi Mathai and NID's director Shuk Chatterjee. The group went to a place known as Javaja, where the idea was to provide or to sort of empower the community through design, or how they can uplift the community. So this was one of the earliest examples of social design. And even if you look at the discourse at IDC, I mean, all the projects you would find that they're around people. They are trying to solve people's problem, and especially even the marginalized groups. And one thing we can see there that they were majorly institutional projects. So the engagement was with the people, but through certain institutions. So if you see this how this particular paradigm of design works, so there, I mean, there is a social design character here, and then Ahmedabad Declaration is one of the major kind of pivot around the discourse. And the idea was also that how design can help in developing India, or also how it can serve the marginalized. And then we can see several threads of design innovation, also one of the some of the earliest threads. Now we look into the third paradigm, which I call as postmodern paradigm of design in India, and this very well corresponds with the idea of postmodernism also, which we see in architecture and art. Uh, it's like to make it very simple. It it is a time, or it is a paradigm where one looks for certain meaning. I mean, beyond utility. So first two paradigms were about solving the problem, or solving the problem for marginalized people. Now here also making meaning out of it. So within the regions, we can see that there were a lot of contextual realizations, and then power of visual communication was realized by both institutes, NID and IDC, and several other educational visions were also there. So so this was a time. I mean, NID had visual communication from 1960s only. This was a time when IIT also embraced visual communication in its discourse. Uh, one of the seminal seminars which happened during this particular paradigm or this particular era was a seminar on Indian symbology, and this was also a kind of explaining to the designers that how communication design is important uh, for everyone. I mean, another event known as Arthya happened in 1986, and this was I see it as a beginning of this new field known as product semantics. So it was there in the Indian traditions, but it was later formalized by scholar Klaus Kippendorf and also from India, Uday Advankar. So the pedagogy we can see here is that there are several user-oriented studios, and also we can see a communication turn. Now people are talking about communication. And when we talk about user-oriented experimental studios, so I have a case here from 1982's summer school at IDC, where the group of students they designed several chairs for different users with similar kind of brief. And also now they were identifying different user groups as like unique. So you can see Sugera here talking about designing for children. In the projects, you can see now a bit of critical regionalism, which is a term popularized by Kenneth Frampton. So now no one is talking about the functionality or the ergonomics of a chair. Now they are talking about the locality or the identity of chair. So you can see several experiments in the material also. So if we try to understand that how postmodern paradigm of design fares, there's a certain focus on communication, there's an emergence of meaning, and then localization. Neoliberal paradigm is my fourth paradigm, and then now just looking at the position, we can see that there is a neoliberal economic turn, and then there are several other factors which are very visible, like local, regional, national, and global. So like a chair is not just a chair for sitting or ergonomics or a material. It is also about the personality of a user who is now looking forward. Vision in this particular paradigm is where design is seen as an economy booster. It is also an opportunity to expand design, and of course, market comes in with several new collaborations. One of the visions that we can see was a report prepared by IDC in 1989, where it argued to the government that how design can uplift the economy. And this kind of developed into its a different form in 2007 as design policy. We now see also the emergence of formal undergrad in IIT systems. So it is very critical, for the Indian academia when design is recognized as one of the disciplines other than engineering and technology and humanities and social science. So this was a third discipline which was recognized within the formal system of Indian education. And then we have the National Design Policy in 2007. There were several conferences also which looked into how we can sort of augment design education or how we can expand in design education in India. Now there were talks about that how design can be taught in several engineering schools also, how design can go beyond the design schools. So this was a manifesto which was prepared by a group of design schools or technology schools, that how design can be taught as a subject in engineering courses. Uh, when we think about materials, so plastic is one of the materials which we consider as like ubiquitous now. It has replaced so many other materials in our everyday life, especially in India. And so there was a huge kind of lobbying, and this happened at design schools also. So how this was promoted was through collaborative studios in 1990s and also several design competitions. Pedagogy here, you can see that in the neoliberal paradigm, it is about expanding the design, and then collaborative design or participatory design uh, with an interdisciplinary turn, that now design economics is also considered design business is also considered as design. And then also the emergence of the term known as design thinking, which not many designers like. But this was a time when we tried to sell design to non-designers. In the projects, we can see that one the designers embrace, or especially in the design education, the information technology. And now no one is actually talking about making things Indian, but now the Indian designer is looking making global things, so that there's a greater market. So if you try to decode that how neoliberal paradigm is, it is about globalization, it is about technological turn, and then emergence of participatory and co-design methods. With this, I come to my last paradigm, that is a retrospective paradigm, where we look back and try to see that whether whatever we are doing is right or not. So there's a pedagogical reflection. We think about that, whatever kind of ideology we were trying to follow, are we able to follow it? Or and then there's a cultural reflection, and then there is also a sense of an environmental reflection. So now all the discourse about sustainability uh, is there in this particular paradigm. So any any kind of thread like design for sustainability, I'll place in this particular paradigm, because unless you become unsustainable, you'll not think about sustainability. So it's also kind of retrospective in that nature. So one of the important conferences that happened in India was Learning from Ulm in 1989. It looked into the heritage of the HFG Ulm, and then how it has fared, how it has continued the very basic ideas or the ideologies of Ulm. Uh, how Ulm design was taken forward, and especially I have placed this particular device known as electronic voting machine, which is the method to elect leaders. And so this was also based on that same ideology. This was exhibited in 1989. Some of the documents which I have labeled in IDC library are readings for own, and then it reflects and then also forwards that how IDC has been doing, how IDC has been faring on those ideas of issues, theories, and opinions. There was another conference which happened in 2003, 2005, I think. Yeah, I remember. Yes, 2005. And this conference brought together eminent design educators, practitioners to think about tradition and then also modernity. So now there's a sense of loss of traditions, and so uh, so so the academia start thinking that how we can bring back that tradition and how we can cope up with the modernity. One of the global events which happened in India within this thread was DHS annual conference in 2013, and the idea of that particular conference was also looking into the post-colonial perspectives, and so this was also looking back into the discourse of design. It was also about rediscovering the lost purposes, like in 70s or in the developmental paradigm when we were looking into design for billion. That particular thing was not carried, and that's why we have so much of inequality in the world. So now, design for a billion as a philosophy emerges up. Uh, maybe in the new millennium market, but again, it's a kind of retrospection that what we have were not able to do. So pedagogy, if you see that it's majorly culture-oriented exploration, and then also several system and ecological concerns which are showed in the design studios. Uh, One of the pedagogical toolkit which was developed by a scholar from IDC was how we can integrate sustainability or the sustainability thinking in design schools. And if I look at the projects, it is about representing nation and culture, uh, and then addressing sustainability through design. So overall, this particular paradigm talks about purposefulness, sustainability, identity, culture, and looking back. So if I compare in terms of in a very comparative way, so pre-independence design was seen as an identity politics, whether it is the work of Rabindranath Tagore, not the work, but the overall design school of Shantiniketan, or the living of Mahatma Gandhi, or nationalist architects, which I showed in BHU and in Birla Temple. Post independence, there are five paradigms, clearly five paradigms. I mean, I don't want to call them eras or isms because they are still continuing. So foundational paradigm is like, setting up ideological cradles, and the idea is again very functionalist here, that you solve the problem, and you just kind of establish the discipline of design. Second is developmental, that how you can design for people, how you can design in the real world, how you can make it like, how design can be a tool for development. Postmodern is basically that diversification and also realization of power of communication. So there's a communication turn. uh, Neoliberal, majorly we are part of it, and it is about globalization and making your design available for the rest of the world. And then finally, is retrospective, that reflection, purposefulness, sustainability, and identity. So thank you. I think I finished in 30 minutes, Chetan.